Hey there. Welcome to episode 6 of the Boob Report podcast, powered by Helix Interactive. Today, I'm hanging out with Marcia Pinkstaff, a successful businesswoman who inspires many. She is a director with Touchstone Crystal by Swarovski and a published author. She was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 9 years ago, just 7.5 months after a completely clear mammogram. She shares her story to encourage and empower others to embrace the good in life and pay attention to your body and any changes. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. It's Michelle Hoagland again for another episode of the Boob Report podcast. This podcast is for women and men, significant others, anyone who is dealing with a loved one or friend going through breast cancer, or a survivor herself. We get raw, we get real, there's tears, there's laughter, it's all here. So we're so happy that you're here to join us. On today's episode, we have Marcia Pinkstaff. She is a successful businesswoman who inspires many. She is a director with Touchstone Crystal by Swarovski and a published author. She was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 9 years ago, just 7.5 months after a completely clear mammogram. She shares her story to encourage and empower others to embrace the good in life and pay attention to your body and any changes. Hey, Marcia, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. I'm so honored to be part of your podcast. So thank you for offering this opportunity to me.
Absolutely. I love for women to be able to share their stories. There's just so many different stories out there, and you just never know that one person that might be going through the same thing and how much this will really help them. So I totally appreciate you being able to join us and just sharing what you went through. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you had a completely clear mammogram, then you get this diagnosis. And while you had friends and things like that, you were an independent single woman diving into this head first, completely on your own.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's enough said. So share a little bit about when you got that call and sort of the emotional roller coaster that caused for you.
So I'm going to step back a little bit before that, Michelle, and just talk about, so clear mammogram, I was 42. That ages me a little bit, but you see, you can come out of cancer well. Mm-hmm. But I thought I was doing everything right. My doctors never said I did anything wrong, though, and thought I was good. Sorry. Being real here. Phone rings always when I'm on a call without fail, and it'll be quiet for hours and then it'll ring. But so I was actually in Atlanta area visiting my college roommate, and goodness gracious. And I was in the bathroom. I'd showered and we were getting ready to do whatever we were going to do that day. It was one of those lovely big wall mirrors. I have those too. Not in love with them, but they are what they are. And wasn't checking myself out per se, but I looked in the mirror and then I looked down and I looked back in the mirror and I looked down again. So my case was a little different. My nipple on my left breast was sunken, that in the area around it, just completely out of nowhere. And I thought, well, this isn't right. And immediately you think of cancer, but then you think, oh, I had a clear mammogram. I'm only 42. I don't have a family history. I'm probably okay. So when I got back in town, back to Colorado, I called my OBGYN's office and told the nurse, whomever answered the phone, I don't remember which person it was. I've dealt with a lot of people over the years, and told her what was going on. And she said, oh, it sounds like an infection. And I said, cool, call me in an antibiotic. And she said, no, you are coming in. The doctor's going to want to see you, but that's probably what's going to happen. is they'll just make sure that's all it is, and they'll give you an antibiotic. And I
Right.
thought, okay, it wasn't even like a come in today. It was let's get you on the calendar so we can get rid of this. And went in. I had no fever, no other symptoms of an infection, and that was a big red flag for the nurse practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
So Pat and Dr. Oster have been through a lot with me over the years. And she examined me and she said, And I said, what's that mean? And she said, well, I'm 50-50. And I said, 50-50? What's 50-50 mean? Right? I'm like, what do you mean 50-50? This is an infection.
Right? I don't think they really think before that comes out, well, I'm kind of 50-50. I'm sorry. What? Yeah.
And she's awesome. It's all good. But I was like, well, wait, this is supposed to be an infection. And she said, well, Marsha, you don't have any other signs of an infection. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, what does that mean? And she said, well, we have to do more tests. It looks like an infection. It feels like an infection. And I would think it's an infection, but we have to make sure. And I'm really not sure, but it does not feel like cancer. And I thought, okay, good. But why don't I have a fever? What the heck? Right? So then it was like a fire drill. After that, it was, you're going to do this tomorrow. You're going to ultrasound mammogram. And I'm in shock and scrambling like, well, no, I have stuff to do tomorrow. I live and die by my calendar. And she said, well, actually, I think that was that afternoon. So she said, just go have lunch. Mm-hmm. Well, I couldn't sit still. So, and those who know me know I love to shop. So I'm wandering around Nordstrom, but I'm not shopping. I'm just looking around, kind of in space. And then I had my mammogram and ultrasound, and the mammogram hurt that time. I mean, I know, ladies, you think they suck. The left breast really hurt. Again, not that could have been, but I kept telling myself, well, an infection probably would hurt if you're going to squish it.
Yeah.
And so, but when I got to the ultrasound, the radiologist said, because I'm a chatterbox at this point, because I'm all nervous and concerned and everything. And she said, well, it's not an infection. And I said, what? They told me it's either an infection or it's cancer. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I'm not saying it's cancer. We need to do some more tests. You need to have a biopsy. Mm-hmm. Joy.
Yeah.
So fun. And I said, I got stuff to do tomorrow. Right? It's like, you're doing it. You got to do this tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I go in, I had a friend drive me, another friend met me. And so I don't want to scare anybody. Most of the areas they did numbed, I felt nothing.
Yeah.
But then there was this one area, and I had super dense breasts. Mm-hmm. And that's part of why they think we didn't catch it, but they did go back at that mammogram later, and there was not a speck on it. Uh-huh. But one area didn't numb. And they kept giving me more anesthesia. And then at one point they said, we have one more area to do. So we can do this, or we can keep giving you anesthesia and you can come back for the other area. And I said, I was in so much pain. I said, I'm not coming back. So you need to finish this today.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was short. It wasn't as awful as it sounds, but it was not fun. And I didn't like them super well.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive area there. All women.
Oh, yeah.
It is very, very sensitive there. Trust me.
It's not.
Yeah.
But most areas take anesthesia. The other 3 they did, I felt nothing. So I don't want to scare people. I just have had so much weird, different stuff out of the ordinary that have happened to me.
Yeah.
And so we found out mine grew in lots of little clusters. Mm-hmm. Not just one that was multiplying. There were all of these that were multiplying inside the milk duct until they oozed out. And like I said, there was not a speck on the mammogram when they went back and looked. So we don't know if a month later, 2 months later, 5 months later, when it would have shown up, but they're convinced I had cancer back then. It was aggressive. Uh-huh. But I learned, if I'm saying this correctly, is you can't see cancer cells under a microscope until there are like a billion in a cluster.
Yeah,
So
there's one, my first oncologist told me that 1 centimeter of a tumor contains 1 billion cancer
mhm.
cells. So just one, I'm sorry, yeah, one, not centimeter, I'm
The
sorry.
millimeter.
Millimeter. I apologize. Correction. Millimeter. 1 millimeter contains 1 billion cancer cells. And I had 6 tumors. My largest one was 4.5 milliliters. And I'm like, so you're telling me I have, you know,
You're like, what?
yeah. So no, yeah, I totally understand. Just to step back, Marcia, what type of cancer were you diagnosed with?
Okay, you ready for a mouthful?
Sure.
I was diagnosed with micropapillary invasive ductal carcinoma.
That's a mouthful.
It is
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Mine was invasive lobular carcinoma. So it just had 3 names. But one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure you've learned this as well, once I got that diagnosis, I had no idea how many different types of breast
No,
cancer there actually are. I
no.
mean, it's jaw dropping how many different types there are.
It's crazy. And I have a friend who, well, I have lots of people in my life going through different things, but some with cancer, and a friend who was just recently diagnosed. And everybody's is different. And you have to follow what your doctors say, what you feel in your heart is best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And go with that, because everybody's is different. And what mine was and what worked for me might not work for somebody else.
Absolutely.
And I learned another thing, that you can be triple positive, you can be triple negative, you can be, and I'm like, what does that mean? I happen to be triple positive. So, which meant I was estrogen positive and progesterone positive, which means both of those feed my type of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third positive, which we think positives are awful usually, but was that Herceptin would work for my type of cancer. So for me, that was a huge blessing.
Right.
Now, it also meant that I was going to do chemo,
Mm-hmm.
radiation, and surgery. And we haven't figured out. It was definitely a mastectomy. I chose to do both. Initially, my mom would laugh if she was on here, because I was terrified of hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
horrified, to the point where I didn't know in my own mind that I was going to do surgery. But once I went through chemo, I said, get them both out.
Yeah.
They wanted to remove both because my mammogram didn't detect mine.
Mm-hmm.
They said, none of us, including you, are ever going to trust a mammogram on your other breast.
Right.
So we suggest you get it out. And like I said, after months of chemo, and like you mentioned, I'm single, and I have an amazing support group of friends, my church, etc. But my family's not here. My family's all out of state.
Right.
And my mom did come out for my double mastectomy, but I wouldn't let anybody come out during chemo. And somewhat selfish, somewhat for their benefit, is I kind of knew. I had an aunt who died of cancer years and years ago when I was a teenager. And I remember seeing her in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and without hair and swollen face and so much more. And I didn't know what I was going to look like. And I didn't want them to see me like that. Not out of embarrassment or anything, but I didn't want to see the look in their eyes when they looked at me.
Yeah.
Because I knew I had to power through this.
Right.
And I had to focus on anything in my life without having kids to focus on. I had a great dog. I have 2 great dogs now, but I had a great dog at the time. She was the best.
Yeah.
But they can't help you. But so I had to focus on, I chose to focus on my business, but I had to focus on the things that were going to keep some level of happiness,
Mm-hmm.
and keep me not focused completely on what was going on with my
Right.
body.
Well, just for a
And
question
yeah.
for you to jump in, how did your family and loved ones react to that request that they not come out?
I think I offended some people.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say they all had jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And chemo's not like my mom. Like I said, my mom came from my double mastectomy.
Mm-hmm.
That was something she could take. She's retired now, but she wasn't 9 years ago.
Right.
And she would have dropped everything to come. But my chemo lasted months.
Yeah.
And I didn't want anybody to have to give up their life. My sister and brother both have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And to come out here for that extended amount of time. And I didn't want them more worried about me than they had to be. And when my mom did come out here for my double mastectomy, and this was weeks after my chemo,
Mm-hmm.
because we had to do, you have to rest up a little bit from chemo before you can have surgery.
Right.
And when she saw me, she told me she had no idea how bad I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her and said, you still have no idea
Yeah.
how bad I was. This is nothing.
Yeah. It's,
So,
and I think that sometimes people are like, well, we need to be there for you. That's the one sort of topic that I keep circling back to with these interviews that I do with everyone is it's not about you, it's about her. And you have to respect what she wants and the decision she makes going through this, because she's the only one going through this. This is her journey and it's not like anybody else's.
no,
So
right.
yeah, it was funny. My mom came out for my bilateral mastectomy as well. My father really wanted to come, and he's older and I mean frail. You know, he doesn't get around as well as he used to. He's in his 80s. And my husband actually put the kibosh on my dad coming out because he said, honey, I can't have you worrying about your father when you should be focusing on yourself.
Yeah.
So I completely understand, you know, where you were coming from with that decision.
Well, I wanted people to come later
Mhm.
when we could do fun things, not just sit around and be depressed about what I was going through.
Right. Right.
So that's what worked for me. And like you said, everybody's different, and you really have to listen and be considerate of what they want. I had one of the hardest things for my family was I have a nephew who had been going through leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
And his treatments were, I think it was like 5 years, if I'm right.
Oh my gosh.
And once we learned he was clear and getting his port out, I was telling everyone I was getting mine in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that probably made it even harder because my whole family, we were all celebrating, and I'm so grateful. There were days where I said, Lord, give it to me. I don't want him to have it. This is not what I meant, but I didn't want him to have to go through it. And so it was tough.
Yeah.
It was the hardest thing about it, I think, was telling my family.
Yeah.
And my friends.
Well, and you've mentioned that you had an aunt who had it, your nephew had it. Did you get genetic testing to see if it was, and was it in your family?
No.
No.
So my aunt who died of, well, I have other relatives who have too, but my aunt in particular that I'm talking about when I was a teenager, she's not biologically related to me. She was my uncle's wife.
Okay.
And I had some great aunts, uncles that got it late in life, but my other aunt who got it younger than some, she wasn't biologically related either.
Okay.
And my nephew, but his was totally a different type.
Right.
And I did get the genetic testing, mostly because there are a lot of women in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sister, I have a lot of female cousins on both sides of my family. And one of the things I was told was that if I had a positive in the genetic testing, then they would have my parents both tested and try to determine which side of the family. And then those family members could be tested, but mine was negative.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine was too. They were like, great news. You know, your genetic testing came back negative. And I'm like, still doesn't explain what's happening here.
But thankful that my family doesn't have to deal with that genetic.
Exactly. So. Yeah, exactly. I'm the only girl. I have 3 brothers. And then, you know, it's my mom, but my mom is one of 14. On her side, my father is adopted, so we don't have any
Mhm.
real medical history from my father's side. So those were the red flags that were set off, along with the type of cancer that I had usually doesn't affect women until their late 50s into their 60s. And I got it at 49. So, yeah, honestly, I highly recommend doing the genetic testing. I did it mainly to decide or help me along with the decision of whether or not to have the bilateral or just do one. And it was just sort of the icing on the cake of my decision that there is no way I'm going through this bullshit twice.
Yep.
Basically, just to put it out there, I'm not doing this twice.
That's why I chose, and I've talked to a lot of women over the years who've tried to decide which is better for them.
Mhm.
And whichever they decided was the best decision, at least at that time for them. Whatever happens down the road, it was the best decision.
Absolutely.
Because you have to believe that.
Mhm.
But I would not change getting both removed because I will not do that type of chemo again.
Right.
It had me crawling some
Mhm.
days.
Yeah.
And anyway, we're going to talk about happy, positive.
Well, honestly, Marcia, I appreciate you saying that because I don't think that a lot of people go into things, I think that the medical profession tries to prepare you as much as possible for what is going to be happening next in the steps. I personally cannot tell anybody, or even understand what it's like to go through chemo or radiation because I didn't have to do that. But the stories that I've heard from women I've talked to and friends that I've had two friends almost die from it. And I think if people are willing to share that part of it and say, yeah, it truly sucked, then women can go into it with their eyes wide open. And if they decide to maybe not do the chemo and look at something different, then they have the information that they need to make that decision, along with talking to their doctor.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't change what I did, but I wouldn't do I don't know if I would do it again.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm done with chemo. And praise the Lord, it's the cancer staying away and it's going to.
Yeah.
I just believe that. And I'm here today because of what I did. Could there have been alternative things? There could have, but with how fast mine was growing, there wasn't time to really go and research and think about holistic in that. I mean, it was the biggest shock. I walked around in shock for I don't know how long. When they were scheduling my meetings with my doctors after I was diagnosed, and this was October 5th, keep in mind. I flipped my calendar to January and I said, I got stuff.
Yeah.
I'm earning this financial bonus with my company. And I need this to pay you. And they said, well, you need to flip your calendar back because you are starting this now.
Yeah.
And my two friends who were with me at the doctor's office both looked at me like, oh my God, we knew you were crazy, but really?
Yeah.
But it was shock. I wasn't thinking clearly because I instantly went into survival mode and being single and owning a home and trying to figure out how you're going to pay your mortgage, how you're going to even be able to do some work for your business when you're crawling around on the floor. But for me, I was able to, my chemo treatments were 3 weeks apart. So my oncologist, I wish she hadn't retired. Dr. K, come back because you are the best. And I like my current oncologist, but I'm just going to say her name, Dr. Cavacci. I love you. And she got me. When I told her I have to work, we need to do things so I can work. She was so proactive with things most people don't want. Steroids, I don't want steroids. But at the time, it was, I need to not be hospitalized. Now there's an after day shot, and my lovely insurance company at the time told me they weren't going to pay for it. And I said, really? What if I end up in the hospital? And they said, we don't know that you need it. And I said, what do you mean you don't know if I need it? I need chemo.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't know if you're going to need to be hospitalized. And again, I'm still in shock of how we are not more proactive with healthcare and wait to react because we're just going to play the odds.
Oh, that's a whole nother episode.
I'll leave that one alone.
That's like 5 episodes long of talking about healthcare, especially when it comes to women and women's, dealing with heart attacks, strokes, breast cancer, infertility, all of that. Honest to God, that's a whole nother episode. But it's interesting that you mentioned Dr. Cavacci, because I actually saw her one time, and she was the one that was telling me about the billions of, cancer cells. She retired shortly thereafter. So I actually was moved to a different oncologist who I'm still with, and I absolutely adore him because he is open to alternative types of treatment, moving forward. He knew that I couldn't take the tamoxifen. I could not take it. And Dr. Cavacci put me on that. But again, everybody's different, how they handle things, how they, go through treatment. I couldn't drive a car. I was dizzy. I was nauseous. I was like,
you can have it.
Yeah. I was like, I can't take the tamoxifen. I can't do it. So luckily, my new oncologist, he was like, that's fine. I get it. We'll look at other things that we can do. You're just going to have to come see me more often so that we can stay on top of things. And, luckily 5 years later, I'm still doing great. But I think that search for that doctor and who you're comfortable with, and that you guys can work as a team is so incredibly important.
Well, and absolutely. And I went to different hospitals. A friend of mine who'd been through breast cancer took me where she went, up to Porter Hospital. Mm-hmm. And when I learned radiation was every day for 8 weeks or whatever it was, aside from weekends, I said, there's no way I'm driving. Well, if you're local, you know how far Parker and Porter Hospital are from each other.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't come up here for that. Mm-hmm. So I actually chose my oncologist first and there was a great surgeon who couldn't meet with me for like 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, that's okay, because my OBGYN said, that's okay, because she'll probably have you in surgery the next day. And I said, yeah, I don't roll that way.
Yeah.
So once I met with my oncologist, and she told me we were going to do chemotherapy first. And I don't know which is the best order, but at that time, that's what they were recommending. Mm-hmm. And I said, awesome. I don't have to process other doctors right now, because my brain can only handle, I have a super analytical brain, which can be good and very bad.
Yeah.
And I could only handle pea-size information and decisions at that point. So she truly, and again, this is not a knock on my current oncologist. I really like her, but Dr. Cavacci was there with me through all of this, helping me get the after-day shot without insurance covering it, and just all different kind of things to keep me, we were very proactive to keep me being able to work. And right. She got it. Yeah. And I would go in and I would be the biggest pain in the ass. And then I would get in my head, Marsha, stop it, you're being a pain in the ass. And I would apologize to her. And there was one day she said, Marsha, she said, I don't want you to ever apologize for that. She said, I know you're going to get through this because of that, because I know you're a fighter. Mm-hmm. Not that you should be rude to the people taking care of you. And I wasn't ever deliberately, but there were times where I just said, this is how it has to be. Mm-hmm. And I had to support myself, and I was blessed. I had some friends who did fundraisers for me and some different things, and still in my house, and just, I'm so blessed. And I was very open with mine, and not everybody wants to be, and that's completely okay. Mm-hmm. It's, again, whatever you choose. But for me, it helped me to share, because if one person finds cancer earlier because they are looking to make sure they don't have it, whether it's a spot on your big toe, I don't care what it is, you have to pay attention to your body. Yeah. And we all know our bodies better than everybody else. I talk about it in my a little bit in my party presentations when I do my touchstone events, just because most of the time one person will come up to me and say, I've been putting off my mammogram, I'm calling tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or something that's thanking me because it's either given them hope, maybe somebody they know is going through it or something.
Mhm.
But I choose to share for awareness. And also I'm sort of writing a book. I wrote a chapter in my last book. I say sort of writing my book because I need to really sit down and work more on it. As my mom and other people remind me that I need to actually work on it. But it's, this is one of those things that it's very personal to everyone. But with everything I went through that I had no clue about, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if I can help even one person,
yeah,
it's all worthwhile.
Well, and I so because I've been to some of the parties that you have hosted, and I so appreciate your openness and your candor about that, because I believe right along with you that if you share your story, you're going to touch at least one person, and that makes all the difference in the world for that one person. Originally, the Boob Report was a private Facebook group for my friends and family to keep them updated on my doctor's appointments and my surgeries and things like that. And it literally inspired two of my friends to go get their mammograms, and they got diagnosed with breast cancer. So my husband, my amazing Prince Charming, was like, you need to do something with this. You need to turn this into something to help other women. So it's been a process. I think everything fell into place to when it was supposed to, but I had to learn a lot about myself before I got to the point to launch this podcast, get the website up and running, and really do the research so that I can help other women with their questions and what they're searching for, searching for answers. Because I think that, like you said, you walk around in a daze after you get that call. And if I can make it easier for someone to be able to just click on the website and find the information they're looking for, that means the world to me.
It's, and the thing, you're completely right. And everybody's different. So you don't know what one person that might be.
Right. Exactly.
And it just, I never thought it would be me. You never thought it would be you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shock.
Right.
But it's important to know that in most cases, people are getting through it.
Mm-hmm.
I know men don't get it very often, but occasionally they do.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, technology is not the right word. I still get a little chemo brain sometimes, but
yeah.
they're so advanced with medical in this area, especially for breast cancer, that even though it's not 100%, the sooner you catch it, the sooner you do what you need to do, whatever that might be for your body, for your type of cancer, etc., the sooner you can get through it and be strong again. This was a bald head.
Yeah.
And I've had way more hair than this. Mine came back pretty normal, a little wavy, which I liked because I always wanted my best friend in high school's curly hair.
I've heard that a lot of women have told me after chemo and they've lost their hair that it's come back more wavy than it was before. I find that fascinating. I wonder, I'm going to have to talk to somebody at some point and figure out how that works. But well, I do want to say we're coming up on a point to wrap up. But the one thing that I just truly admire about you, Marcia, is how you've turned things around, and you work for Touchstone Crystal, which I think is absolutely beautiful. You guys can't see it on the podcast, but people will be able to see it on the YouTube channel. She gave me this beautiful necklace that I wear for all my podcast recordings. I just love it. I love how you use the term that you bring sparkle into life. And we will share links for Marcia in the show notes so that you guys can go check out her website. There is some amazing jewelry on there, and she does give back quite a bit with her parties to different charities and things like that. So you'll be able to learn more about Marcia through that, and we'll have all that in the show notes for you guys. But Marsha, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. I am in awe of you every time we see each other at different events and things like that. You've just got such an amazing outlook on life. And I so appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Well, that's mutual, my friend. I absolutely adore you. You inspire me, and I love what you're doing for women to share and get the information out. And you're so special. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that was an amazing episode with my dear, amazing Marsha. So happy that she was able to join us and share her story. As I mentioned at the end of the podcast, we will have links in the show notes so that you can check out her beautiful sparkle smile, her website, any way you want to get in touch with her. Marsha is amazing, and I highly encourage you to reach out. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Boob Report, and we look forward to seeing you guys again very, very soon. Wow, such an incredibly strong and independent woman. She is a force to be reckoned with, and I am so grateful to her for joining us today. And a very big thank you to all of you for spending time with us today. Be sure to like and follow us, and definitely share the podcast with your friends. You can become an active listener and support this podcast by clicking on the podcast link on our website at www.theboobreport.com. Take care.